Thank you all. Got a reminder that we're recording. Thank you all for joining tonight's Nooksack Watershed or WIRA 1 focused adjudication webinar. We are pleased to have such broad attendance and hope that tonight's presentation and follow-up Q&A session will paint a fuller picture of the adjudications process and help answer questions that you have. We have a number of Ecology staff present to field questions, including Robin McPherson, our adjudication manager, Casey Cycler, our Northwest Region Water Resources Manager, and Tom Baroker, Ecology's Northwest Region Director. In a few minutes, Robin McPherson will walk us through the agenda. But first, I'm very pleased to introduce the Department of Ecology's Director, Laura Watson, who will share opening remarks and kick us off. Laura, welcome.
Great. Thank you so much, Ria. And thank you everyone for coming out this evening to hear our webinar on adjudication in the Nooksack Basin. As you heard from Ria, I'm Laura Watson. I'm the director for the Department of Ecology. And I really appreciate those of you who are coming here to learn more about the plans for adjudication and how the process is going to work. I want to begin by saying Ecology's goal here is to find water solutions for the Nooksack Basin. We all know that water is a finite resource, and we have a lot of pressure and we have a lot of need for that resource right now, especially as we continue to see population growing throughout Western Washington and including in Whatcom County. So really the ultimate goal in this is to understand the scope of the need in the basin and to develop water supply solutions that are going to help us meet those needs. And when I'm talking about needs and solutions, I'm talking about all of it. I'm talking about the spectrum. I'm talking about fish. I'm talking about farms. I'm talking about people. I'm talking about in-stream flows and irrigation water and recreational uses and drinking water and so on and so on. And I want to say that no one at Ecology is looking at this, and I'm certainly not looking at this with rose-colored glasses. We know that finding solutions is going to be challenging. And even more so as we see climate change putting greater pressure on our finite water resources. So challenging, yes, but certainly not undoable. And in fact, it's something that we are doing right now. We are developing solutions now in other parts of the state that are much drier than we are here in soggy Western Washington. And what we found is that we can develop solutions when all of the parties come to the table. They come with a genuine good faith willingness to work together in doing exactly that and in respecting everybody else's needs for this precious shared resource. At the Department of Ecology, we see adjudication as an essential component of the ultimate goal of developing solutions. And I will say that we did not come to that decision lightly. I understand that for at least some water users in the basin, this may feel like a daunting process. Folks may have concerns and worries about, well, what is this going to mean for me? What is this going to mean for my neighbors, for my family? Some people might be worried that an adjudication could present a risk to the water supply that you currently depend on. We understand those concerns. But the challenge is that water supplies in the Nooksack Basin are already under pressure, right? They're already at risk. For many years now, those of you that live in the Nooksack have faced the twin issues of too little water when you need it and too much water when you don't need it. And of course, what I'm referring to there is we have low stream flows, we have drought in the summer, and we have flooding in the winter. And then as we see the effects of climate change continue to grow, we're going to see these swings become more extreme and we're going to see more damage. So for example, current climate change models are predicting a drought almost every other year by 2050. And then as temperatures continue to warm and we see more wintertime precipitation, it's falling as rain rather than snow, we're going to see more and more severe flooding in the winter. In the meantime, disputes over conflicting water rights among the area's water users are going to continue. And the water right permitting framework in the Nooksack Basin has become more fragile as a result. And frankly, it's more difficult, much more difficult without a clear legal system for resolving disputes. Again, with the ultimate goal of working together to find solutions to the water supply problems that we're facing. And while we know that adjudication alone is not going to solve the problem, It is a crucial component in reaching solutions that are going to work for everyone. Solutions like infrastructure require significant funding, and that includes significant federal funding. Bringing the federal government into adjudication will bring federal settlement money into the process. And I will say that federal money has been a game changer in the Yakima and the Columbia River basins. And then there's other solutions like water markets that will become possible once we have more clarity on what water is available, where is water needed, when and where does it need to be in stream. Basically, the Nooksack Basin solutions are going to have to meet that full range of local needs. And obviously important to acknowledge here that when we're talking about meeting local needs, this very significantly includes respecting the treaty rights and the rights immemorial of the tribal nations and seeking the participation of the Lummi Nation and the Nooksack tribe in this process. The Whatcom County community has a long history, going back 30 years and more, of working together on these issues. Local communities, tribal nations, farmers, and others who live and work and thrive in the watershed. Ecology has been at the table for these conversations, and we know how sincerely this community has attempted to develop solutions. And we intend to continue working with you on those solutions. At the same time, we are committed to making the adjudication process as streamlined, as transparent, and as user-friendly as possible. Tonight's webinar is just one of the ways that we're joining together to understand your questions. Hopefully we won't get stumped by too many of them, as Jimmy said. Hopefully we'll be able to answer most of them, provide answers tonight, or we'll follow up if we can't, and really just make this process as straightforward as we can. So again, thank you so much for coming out this evening to be part of this, to be part of the conversation, part of the process. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Robin McPherson, our adjudication manager, who will go over tonight's agenda.
Thank you, Laura, and thanks, Ria. I'm really glad everybody has been able to join us. We have a long list of participants tonight, and that's just really exciting for us. We planned this outreach in order to be able to answer your questions and reach the community, and also be a starting point for future conversations. Although for many of you, this is the midpoint of conversations, and we've had a lot of in-person and online conversations with the community of the area over the past couple of years. So some of you today will be hearing things that sound like old news. If you've heard me talk about prior appropriation before, just take a deep breath and be ready to hear it again, because I'm going to say it again, because we always have new people in the audience, or people who tell me later, I've heard this explained many times, but today I understood it a little better. This is a complicated and sophisticated process, and so we want to keep trying to explain what we're doing, get the message out, and be sure that we have plenty of time to answer questions. So what we're doing today is I'm going to be giving an overview of adjudications for about 30 minutes, touching on what we're doing, just a little bit of a reminder about how water is legally regulated and legally available. And we're going to talk about why we are proceeding with adjudication in WIRA 1. I have a map so we can see exactly what we mean by WIRA 1, and then also walking through what this means for water users. If you've seen these presentations before, this one is going to have a little more detail about exactly what's going to happen. We've been really working this past year to prepare for adjudication with developing the claims process and the notice process, and so I will be able to give you more information about that today. After I speak, you will hear from Casey Cycler. Casey is our Northwest Regional Manager of all water resources in the Northwest region, which is King County up to Canada, Pierce County, actually, Tacoma up to Canada. And Casey will be talking about regional water management and talk about what is going on day to day on the ground in your area as far as water management. And an important thing that Casey will do is let you know who to talk to about current concerns about your water use, water management, your neighbor's water use. Casey and her staff are on the ground. They go out into the field and talk to people measuring water, looking at certificates and water rights. And she's the one to answer your questions about that. If you haven't met Casey, I'm really glad that she's here so that you can meet her tonight. After that, we will be able to open up for question and answer. We've got a good amount of time set aside for that. And so hopefully that'll let us get to everybody's questions. I can't pretend to have all the answers, and some things are best addressed by stepping away, conferring, and coming back. So we're happy to follow up, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that later on. I also wanted to mention that we're joined tonight by Tom Buroker, who is our Northwest Regional Director. Tom is responsible for ecology work in this geographic area beyond water resources, including what we're doing today, but also everything else that ecology does: water quality, air quality, other kinds of shorelines work and permitting work in your area. Tom oversees all of that and is a contact for the community on all of those issues. So he's here listening to your questions. If something comes up of concern that falls outside the parameters of what we're talking about with adjudication, I don't know if I'll have time to answer it, but he's always happy to follow up, and I'm thankful for him to listen in. We're supported tonight by our communications team, which is Jimmy Norris, Barbara Brooks, and Chris Anderson. They're going to facilitate your questions. They should be managing closed captioning and have a transcript. And so they will also be providing a recording of this video afterwards, so that we can have it to refer to, and so that everybody can share and see what was talked about today if they didn't have a chance to attend. So that being said, unless I get a big warning wave from Barbara or our monitors, I'm going to just jump right in here to my presentation on water right adjudications.
That sounds great, Robin.
Thank you. Now, this all worked when we practiced at 5 o'clock. Let's see if it works now. Excellent. Participants can see your screen. It says WIRO 1 water right adjudications.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I want to start by talking about water in Washington State. Just really briefly, water law can be very complex in the details, but it really comes down to something quite simple, and that is to think about in terms of who owns the water. Water is a public resource, a lot like the air. Water is legally regulated, but if we think about who owns it, it's owned, it belongs to the public as a public resource. So sometimes people say as shorthand, the state owns the water. I'd like to say that the state is the steward of the water, and the Department of Ecology is in particular charged by statute with regulating the water because it belongs to everybody. And that's important because water belongs to everybody, to the public of the state, regardless of where it is in relationship to a piece of property. And the important point I want to make there is that just because water might be run through, under, or come out of private property, it is still a public resource. And that's a decision that was made long ago, around 1917, the first days of the Water Code, that in the early days of statehood, our legislature decided that they wanted water to be a public resource that they would regulate under the doctrine of prior appropriation. And so this is, of course, oversimplified, but I think that point is helpful. I have water that rains this time of year, not today in Olympia, but get big puddles out there, and that water is part of the water system that is belongs to the state. It doesn't mean that necessarily I can't put a pond on my property or dig a ditch on my property, but it means that when we do those things, the state might want to talk to us about them. Often there are minimums or limits about how big something has to be or where it is connected to before the state's involved in it. So that's our first principle about water, is a public resource. Now, I mentioned prior appropriation, and prior appropriation is the doctrine that was set forth in 1917 in our first surface water code that says first in time is first in right. And what that means is in early days of the water code, if an individual had water that they were using, and usually this is tied to land use and land ownership, but if they had a water right that they were using at a pump for their house, and someone went in, say upstream, and decided to divert water to take it off of the property and put it in for their own house for their use, the user who was there first could say, I have priority on this water. And I'm imagining here, you know, a simple stream that goes upstream to downstream with different pipes on them. I think that might be the easiest way to imagine it. And that reminds us that, you know, it is fair for a user who first used this water to be protected against impairment by users that come later. And we apply that principle under the law over now 105, coming up on 106 years of water code. The surface water code was from 1917. At the time, it did make clear that water users who were already there did not necessarily have to immediately have a water certificate, but other than that, surface water users needed to apply to the state for permits and certificates, and the permit system gives us documentation so that people have an understanding of who was there first. In 1944, the groundwater code was passed that really mirrors the surface water code. And so groundwater in our aquifers was regulated starting in 1944. And I'll tell you, I'm really thankful for that, especially when we look at states that did not have that recognition and realization for groundwater. Those states have drained aquifers right and left. I'm not going to name names, but if you grew up in Washington like me, it's easy to make fun of large states to the south that have not been as forward thinking as we have in making sure our aquifers are protected. Now, often, but not always, aquifers are connected to related surface water bodies. And when that happens, they're in the same priority scheme. And so the law is that a withdrawal from a aquifer from a well still might be junior to a surface water right. And so those are often connected. Really good technical questions about where they're connected and how far connectivity goes. But where there is a connection, junior users are still not legally able to impair senior water users. And so then when I use the word priority date, that phrase means the date of first use. And so that's often the date of beneficial use. It also can be the date of applying for a permit. And so this is just a quick footnote here. What are the sources of these laws? I mentioned the water code, that's the RCW. There's rules like in-stream flow rules that are Washington Administrative Code. Treaties like our Indian treaties, the Treaty of Point Elliott ceded the lands of much of Wairo 1, but not all, through an agreement with the Lummi Nation and Nooksack tribe. I do see tribal staff and tribal members on the call today. I want to thank you for participating and listening today. And federal law touches on treaties and also touches on other issues of priority, including water in the National Forest and Mount Baker National Forest. And then just have this note here, water is regulated through certificates, stream flow, and planning. Planning is a county function more than an ecology function, but they can overlap. So what is adjudication? Adjudication is a process that quantifies, that means puts numbers on all legal water use, including federal and tribal rights. Now, we have what I mentioned, a permit system. We have a lot of permits, hundreds of permits in the area. And we have other kinds of water rights like permit exempt uses. We have the treaty uses that I was mentioning that do not have, other than the treaty itself, do not have a list, an inventory, or a document associated with it as of this time. And so an adjudication is a process where every water use on a water source will, at the end of the adjudication, have a number, a priority date, a quantity, and a place or purpose of use. And that's called quantification. To be in this process, Ecology notifies all water users and claimants. And so we are doing ongoing kind of public outreach like this, but also during this process, when we file the adjudication, we will provide legal notice. And I'll talk a little bit about what that means to water users and claimants. This is a court process, and so Ecology is going to file in Whatcom County Superior Court, and then the judge of the court will help us determine exactly what the steps are along the way. And so Ecology will provide notice, the court will help us put deadlines in the notice, and then the court will guide us along the way as to how to do the process. Kind of like an umpire or a referee. A referee can mean something really specific, but that's what sets the rules for the adjudication. I'll talk to you more about this, but just right now, keep in mind that the end result of adjudication is a final decree that shows all legal water users in order with priority dates. So this is the area we're talking about. WIRA 1 is the Nooksack. If you don't work in environmental or fisheries law, it sounds funny to say WIRA. People say, call me after this and say, is it WIRA or WIRA? I just say WIRA. That doesn't mean it's better or worse than anyone else. This is the WIRA. It's defined by the law. We call it the Nooksack WIRA because the Nooksack system is its largest feature, but it actually goes entirely north of the Nooksack system to the Canadian border. We are planning to adjudicate the entirety of WIRA 1. We have petitions from Lummi Nation and Nooksack tribe to adjudicate the entirety of their water rights, which lie within this WIRA. And there's also, even if it looks at this point that some outlying water users here are not directly connected to the Nooksack, there could be opportunities for water to move back and forth, you know, like through infrastructure or other solutions. I'm kind of speaking way outside the ballpark here, but just the idea is we really want to resolve all water users in the WIRA when we have the adjudication open. So it includes, this should be around about the Nooksack. It's generally Whatcom County, although the county line runs through here. So we pick up some bits of Skagit County, and it does not include some bits of Whatcom County, but it includes all of this. Now the numbers on here are something we prepared for other purposes, but it's actually kind of good to see how many water certificates and permits are in each of these sub-basins. And there are, as far as permits and certificates, there are dozens, in some cases hundreds. In the lower Nooksack, which is a big agricultural area, there are hundreds of certificates. And in some places there are far less. Chilliwack, okay, so that's actually claims. So this number that says claims here, water right claims are unproven but filed claims for very early water use. And that's an important point because there are many claims. You'll see here, the number for claims usually is like more than twice everything else. Look at this, 1889 claims in the lower Nooksack. We don't know, because adjudication is our only process and we haven't done it yet. We don't know how many of those claims are valid and how many of them are just old typed up pieces of paper from very early days. So that's part of what we're going to be doing in the adjudication process, is sorting out those claims. We have some challenges in WIRA 1, and Laura was touching on this. We know that there's not enough water now, certainly not for the long-term future. And what does that mean when we say there are challenges in WIRA 1? First challenge here is what I was just saying. Records do not reflect use. There are 100-year-old claims. There can be overlap with multiple water rights on one piece of property. That in itself isn't a problem. But if there are both overlaps and gaps, it can be very hard for a water user, property owner, buyers, sellers, and regulators to understand what the legal water use is on that property. We have some in-stream flow confusion. Confusion might kind of be the wrong word now that I look at it. We have tribal claims for in-stream flow going back to before the time of the treaties. We have an in-stream flow rule from 1985. There is dispute or debate around how much water is in each one, how far the rule reaches. We have very regular litigation around that. And so as a rule, the in-stream flow rule should have a priority of about 1985. That is something the adjudication court would be looking at. And also we have indication from the tribes that they intend to submit claims that for quantification of their own water rights in this process. And so that's something that we really are looking forward to and appreciate the tribes agreeing to do. Because of this, it's hard to buy, sell, or lease water because we don't know exactly what water goes with each property. That means all rights are vulnerable to impairment. When will we know who's on first? When will we know if somebody's in front of me in line? We also have, we know there's a need for infrastructure solutions, storage, piping, and pumping, for instance, but from where and to who? That should say to whom, but I just can't make myself type whom, but I just want to let people know I know that that's, I think, a place where it should be whom. But where is this water supposed to go? Who's first in line? Who gets it? And that's something that, you know, we can sit down and someone will say, if I had $1 million, I could solve this by moving it from point A to B. Well, is everybody really in the room for this conversation? Do we know that B is where the water should go? Do we know that A actually has water to move? That's the kind of thing that adjudication helps with. And so the solutions here, I try to line up to help people understand why we're doing this. A clear prioritized inventory that will help records reflect the use. Fair and clear law on in-stream flow. Adjudicated certificates at the end of the adjudication can possibly be banked, sold, leased, or changed. Now, I put possibly in there because I don't know what the certificates are going to look like, and I don't want this to be a promise that they could be changed from someplace to another, but adjudicated certificates are very valuable, and that provides for buying, selling, and leasing water. We will know in adjudication who has what and what is left over. We will know who needs water, who gets water, and we anticipate adjudication improving our funding to support infrastructure solutions, especially federal funding. So, adjudication process. Here's where we're at in the process. For the past 2 years of the biennium, we've been in step 1. I just put these numbers on this afternoon. They might not look like other ways that it has been numbered. Ecology identifies water users. Yes, we do mean surface and groundwater. We do mean permits, certificates, and claims. We also will be including permit exempt uses by rural parcel. I have more information for that on the following slides. The second part of the process is Ecology files in Superior Court. Our current target for this is approximately fall 2023. It might seem like that date is vague or like it's moving, but for a large process like this, I think we really are being as transparent as we can and as accurate as we can predicting when this is going to happen. We anticipate our budget funding coming on July 1st, and it will take time after that to be sure that Ecology and the courts are prepared to file. And I moved this date from late summer to fall, you know, really just for us tonight. And part of that is to just take pressure off of us to jump the gun and be filing before we're ready, just because I said so on a slide. We really need to do this well. We need to be sure we're funded and that the systems are up for us to do it properly. And we take that really seriously. So right now that's looking like, you know, 8 to 12 weeks out from funding, which puts us pretty much into fall. At that time, we'll notify the parties, propose a process to the court, and the court will set deadlines and pathways for how the adjudication will proceed. Water users after that time will respond with the claim. I think it's fair to say this would be late 2023 at the soonest. A couple points about that is that there will be online, phone, and in-person support. We've already been working on having a local phone number that can be called to connect with Ecology employees and staff to talk about, be sure everybody can get in and file their claim, and even have a kiosk in the Bellingham field office where people can go if they don't have a computer at home or they don't have reliable internet to sit down and work on their claim there. We'll have both electronic and paper filing available. The electronic filing we're working on is with a vendor through the administrative office of the courts, and that is something that they are designed for a vendor that does unrepresented filings. For instance, like with something like divorce or child support, they have software now that courts can use that someone can go in, type in everything they know, and that generates a filing that literally prints out a filing and electronically sends it to the court. We're working on developing that system right now. It is going to be designed for use without lawyers, although I certainly understand that many people's water use has complicated legal issues and that they'll desire legal representation in the process. Here's the big, so this is still number 3, claimants. And here's the question of how different claimants will be involved in the process. And I'm going to say right now, Jimmy, I'm going to go to 6:15, not 6:10, and I'm going to cut into Casey's time a little bit, I think, here, because I want to be sure that I can cover this. So there are different categories. These blue and green categories are both for permit exempt uses. Small residential users, non-commercial residences, we will be proposing a simplified process. That would be a single signature for date of first use and place of use, and getting that to be as simple as we can for the mass of users, which are thousands of permit exempt users, of small residential users. Now we have other permit exempt users, same permit exemption, but larger use. And those can be up to 5,000 gallons per day. Those can be small farms, industrial and commercial uses. And those will look, the green is permit exempt like the blue, but it's going to look more like the documented rights, which means filing the highest use and the current use of water and a full claim explaining the history of the water use. The goal for this is to get an adjudicated certificate for this water use that really accurately represents the current legal use of the right. And it says up to 5,000 gallons per day here, just to make a note. Stock water does not have that 5,000 gallon per day limitation, but we would expect those wells to still participate in the process so they get that adjudicated certificate at the end of the day. Documented rights, and these are the ones that we find in the water right tracking system. It's actually called Water Right Search, and I've got a screenshot of it, and I've got a link to paste in a moment where we can look up our own water rights. Those could be permits, certificates, and claims. They should have a priority date from the document, and those will be adjudicated to the quantity and place of use. But even if there is a water right certificate, that's a really great starting place, but you will still need to file a claim in the adjudication and see how much of the water in that certificate is currently valid. If it's been really recently addressed, for instance, a change or a proof of appropriation within the last 5 years, then that would be a very simple process because we won't be revisiting that work by Ecology. Okay, then what happens after the claims process? Again, just made these numbers up today, and then I thought, well, maybe 4 should have an A and B here, but 4 claims are submitted to the courts and Ecology. Well, maybe that was the same as 3, but those claims will be filed. Excuse me. I tend to think aloud even on this kind of thing. Claims will be submitted to the court. Evidence will be submitted for claims other than permit exempt small residences. We expect to need additional evidence. What is evidence? Well, the RCW has a list of all these things that can mean, but it really can include personal statements and personal knowledge of what has happened on the process. So if you have been there and seen things happen, your signature on a declaration is evidence. And that's, the standard of proof in a civil proceeding, and it's good enough for ecology, just like it is in a permit or a certificate change process or a permit application process. Now, sometimes we'll need additional documentation or evidence, either because the current owner doesn't know the history or because we really just want to dig in and see more detail than we have. And so that will be an evidentiary process. But I just want to be clear here that we're looking first and foremost at declarations, and we are looking at evidence that ecology can take in and use that to verify the amount of water and date in the claim. Ecology will be reviewing these and preparing reports of findings. I saw a question the other day about the burden of proof. It actually is Ecology's burden of proof for its report of findings to meet the preponderance of evidence standard. So our reports of findings have to show that it is more likely than not that our determination on this water is correct. After we prepare a report of findings, we can go back and forth with claimants in that property and say, hey, I think you got the address wrong, or I think that it looks like this was being watered and it wasn't. Those kinds of things, it will be a lot like proof of appropriation or a change process where we have an interaction in that way. There's also an opportunity for water user feedback after the report of findings goes to the court, and that can be objecting to your neighbor's water rights. If you say, hey, I'm not too sure about that, or I think that they used the law wrong, or if I think they were wrong about their history, there is an opportunity to object. But mostly what we would expect is individuals objecting to their own and saying, oh, come on, Ecology, I disagree with you, I'm going to object. The court will hear that and make final decisions. What I want to make clear about that, though, is that that is not required for every water right. The opportunity is required, but it does not have to happen. And I know when we hear about big litigation, we get this kind of Aaron Brockovich view of, big lawyers and the little guy and all of these courtroom dramas, like what is it, My Cousin Vinny? That stuff makes for good TV, but good entertainment, but that's really not how the law is written on adjudication. We do not need to have in-person testimony unless there's some reason that the declarations are not adequate, is my understanding of the law. One does not need to object to one's neighbor in every detail unless there's a real concern. We anticipate that a lot of these will be agreed. If Ecology and a water user agree, the law says we need to tell the court that. We need to say, hey, we agree with this user on this use, and the court will still needs to give it out for comment, but if nobody objects, then it's done. And it really has the potential to be a fairly streamlined process. At the end of the process is a final schedule where the court issues the schedule, schedules that list water rights in order of priority, like I mentioned before. Okay, so what I wanted to take a minute to glimpse here is a screen from our water rights search. And oh my gosh, I had it ready to paste in the chat, but I don't know if I can multitask here. I actually just posted a link here to the water rights search, and that is the database that has an online face that anyone can go to and type in an address and find the water rights in that area. So this is shows the South Fork Nooksack, and it's one that I had on the screen when I was up in Deming in October, not Deming, Van Zant Community Center. I met some of you then in October. This is what happens if you go look at an area, and our mappers actually look just at the South Fork here. And the triangles and the circles represent diversions and pipes of groundwater and surface water. And so this is a way to see what, and these represent documents in Ecology's records. So where there are triangles or circles, those represent documents that are in the system. And so this is just a glimpse of what this system can do. It can zoom in, you can search by address and otherwise, but this shows us where the place of use is, or where the point of diversion is for each of these water rights. Now the gray lines on here should be the parcel map, and I'm not 100% sure on that, but this does look like the county parcel layer. And what we're going to be doing is, what we have done is found some of these were originally bigger, so the place of use might be bigger, and then it might have been divided up into smaller parcels over the years. It's not an unusual pattern. And so we've got the legal users through the county property tax records of every place of use of a water right in our system. We also will be serving permit exempt users. The law tells us to go to rural parcels outside a service area. So we most importantly don't need to serve everyone in the city of Bellingham, but we do want to touch everyone and be sure that potential permit exempt users in rural areas get notice. Okay. Oh, that was 6:10. I was talking fast there at the end. So for more information, this is my contact information. One thing we really love to do is come and meet in person, but I do ask for that we get as much advance notice of a request as possible so that we can be efficient with our use of time traveling into town. Casey Cycler lives in Whatcom County, and so she has easier access. I'm happy to travel up, but it really is best for me to combine those so that I'm not traveling, spending 4 hours now on I-5 to get through Seattle for really small meetings. But I have had great luck. I know I've met with many of your groups before, and I think sometimes it's really great to have a small conversation. I also can take questions by email. We also have been updating every month at the Water Right Advisory Committee. And Chris, maybe you can at some point, maybe we can just lay a link to that out too, so people know about RAC and that's a place we're updating for information. Our website is up to date, and we are really trying to get as much information out there as we can. Remote meetings are nice too, and those are always happy to fit those in. So that is our stopping point. I will take questions, but I want to be sure that Casey can speak first. So I'm going to stop my share and I'm going to turn off my camera so I can have a big drink of water here, and Casey can go next. Thank you, Casey.
Thanks, Robin. And I'm just gonna make sure everybody can see and hear me okay. Can I get some confirmation that my screen is sharing?
Your
Yes,
screen is
Casey.
sharing.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And thanks everybody again for being here tonight. I know it's the dinner hour, so thanks for, either having a late supper or maybe sharing your dinner table with us this evening. As Robin mentioned, my name is Casey Cycler, and I'm the Northwest Regional Manager for our Water Resources Program. Had the opportunity to work with many of you, recognize a lot of names that are here tonight, but also excited that we have a lot of new names that I'm unfamiliar with. For those of you who I haven't had the opportunity to work with or who haven't worked with Ecology too frequently, we do have 2 offices in the region. We have our regional office in Shoreline, and then we also have a field office in Bellingham. And we have water resources staff located at both offices that are available and eager to help if you have questions or concerns or need technical assistance. Our work is focused on helping with water rights, well drilling, and a lot of related areas. A couple of things I was hoping to touch on tonight, and I'll try and run through them quickly because I know you've already had the opportunity to hear from some great speakers, is talking about some of our unique water resource management challenges that we do have in the watershed, some of the work we have taken thus far to bring about solutions, and then opportunities that exist now if you do have questions, or maybe you're sitting through this presentation and you've just thought of something that you'd like some help with. Like to offer you some opportunities for how to go about that. So as we've heard, I think from both Robin and Director Watson, WIRA-1 has one of the most complicated records of historical water right documents in terms of the overall quantity of documents, the interrelationship, as well as just some confusing history up here. They often have overlapping attributes to the water rights portfolio, and it's been really difficult for water resources managers to really differentiate valid water rights from those that are duplicative or have potentially been relinquished or abandoned or simply aren't valid on their face. So this complicated documentation has really made management for water resources extremely challenging in the Nooksack. If you've lived up here your whole life, it may seem like it's really normal, but if you were to live somewhere else in the state, it probably would be a little eye-opening to see how different it is up here. And as those of us who do live in the area know, we really have seen through flooding that we have a tremendous amount of water during certain times of the year. But in the summer times, we frequently have insufficient quantities. This has been going on for an extended period, and it's been really difficult to meet current in-stream and out-of-stream demands for water in peak season, which is generally the summer and late fall. And so this has really made balancing water for in-stream uses as well as new consumptive out-of-stream uses a challenge. So clarifying our water rights through an adjudication is the necessary first step that we see towards understanding where new water is needed, where water is available, and what specific solutions we need to help get water where it's needed and when. I'm going to switch slides here and talk a little bit about some of our solutions, which have been really exciting to be a part of. For those of you that have lived in the watershed for a long time, you may recall that we have spent literally decades working on water resource solutions in the Nooksack. And I just want to assure you that we intend to continue to do so for many, many, many years ahead. Our Bellingham field office opened about 3 decades ago to help provide community technical assistance and solutions to environmental challenges in the region, which included water resources issues. So to that end, in terms of physical solutions, we have provided many millions of dollars in water resources grants in the Nooksack in recent years. This includes projects that seek out new water sources that don't negatively harm salmon or reduce summer stream flows, such as deep wells in the northwest portion of the county, stream flow augmentation projects like you see here, that use groundwater to bolster low flows in local streams in the summer low flow season. Nearly $5 million granted to the city of Linden to build a managed aquifer recharge project that will capture high winter flood flows and retime for release during lower flow periods. And very recently, more than $5.5 million to the county and the local land trust for the Stewart Mountain Community Forest to benefit stream flow and water quality. We've also been working really hard on coming up with legal solutions. We have worked successfully with local, state, and federal governments, as well as our local county government as well, and the Lummi Nation, to seek and implement a court-approved settlement for groundwater on the Lummi Peninsula. And as well as that, we have, over the past 15 years, actively participated in 3 watershed-wide water rights settlements attempts. Currently, some of you may be aware that Whatcom County has proposed and is leading another settlement process that will run in parallel with and in addition to Ecology's adjudication process. This is a county-led process, but Ecology is actively engaged. We are sharing information and we are actively dedicating significant resources to participating in moving this process ahead. And if successful, it can be enfolded into the adjudication process by the courts. And as I mentioned, and kind of bridging off what Robin had to share earlier, I imagine people might have some questions about their own water rights or water rights for family or friends. So for those interested, I did want to provide to you our Bellingham field office phone number, which is here on the screen. We strongly encourage you to give a call. free technical assistance with some great employees that are happy to walk through whatever scenario, situation, or list of questions that you have at any time. You're welcome to call anonymously. You're welcome to give your name. We can do whatever you're comfortable with doing, but we sure want to get you that information that you're interested in. If you need a copy of your water rights portfolio, if you think you might have a water right but aren't sure, these are all things you can call and ask about. I also have on the screen here a reference to our water rights search that Robin mentioned, and a link was put into the chat function. Another easy way to go about it, if you're not able to cut and paste it this evening, is to just go to our main website, ecology.wa.gov, and then in the search engine, you can put in the water rights search. We also have a publicly available well log database, and that's the second bullet there. You can certainly go into the search engine and look for any well logs that you might have attached to your property, or like I said, family or friends that would like some research on theirs as well. And that's all done anonymously, and you can do it yourself at your leisure. But if you have any questions or run into any dead ends and do need additional assistance, please do give us a call. Again, we are happy to help. We have technical assistance staff that have been available literally for decades, and we're happy to continue to help you tomorrow and in the days ahead. And with that, I will wrap it up and hand it back over to Jimmy and Robin, I think, for some question and answers.
Thank you, Casey. Yeah, we've got a few questions. Again, I'm going to start with the ones that have been typed and sent to us that way. And after that, if you want to raise a hand, we can go that route. All right. So the first question, how do you reconcile water management with Washington water law, which gives finite ownership to a user based on seniority? Solutions, apply, agreed management.
Thanks, Jimmy. I appreciate that. Washington water law, it's the water, the ownership of the right, which I talked about at the beginning, is a use right to water. So it is a property right. If you have a piece of property and have been using water, that is a kind of property right. It's just a right to use the water. It's not a right to own it in the same way that we own real estate and our personal possessions. And so I think that, the law reconciles that with prior appropriation by setting out the first in time, first in right principle through the water code, and delegating ecology as of the, originally it was the Department of Engineering, and now it's the Department of Ecology, is the agency that is in charge with carrying out the water code. So sometimes those are difficult questions. Sometimes they're philosophical questions. I don't know if this is more philosophical, but a lot of it's in the law. We follow the law. If we disagree about the law, the courts will take a look at that with us. If we disagree with a county or a water user or a tribe, the courts work through those and publish decisions, and that's why we end up with a lot of published appeals decision about the law. So I think that's how it all balances out. We're doing our best to interpret the law in good faith with what it gives us, and that includes with established stream flows, and that includes with the limitations on how we can look at tribal treaty water. And that's one reason we're really hoping that adjudication helps move that along.
Thank you, Robin. Next question. I have a certificate to withdraw 130 acre feet per year. Do I need to be concerned?
Okay, thank you. So I have a certificate for any amount of money or any amount of water. How do I need to be concerned? So the law asks us to provide a claim form for to submit your document, your highest use and your current use of the certificate. Now, of the water under the certificate. Now, sometimes certificates have a higher use than has ever been used since the time, and relinquishment can apply to that water if it has never been used. If it has been validated through a proof or a change in the last 5 years, I would not giving anybody legal advice, but I would pretty comfortably say you do not need to be concerned. If it's been more than 5 years since that certificate has been approved in any process, there's a chance that it is valid for less than that total face amount. And to determine that, the court will look at your highest use and your current use. If you are currently using and have always currently used that full amount, then I would say more or less, again, not legal advice, you don't need to be concerned. It's when over the history of the water right, it goes up and down, that there is a concern called relinquishment.
All right, thank you very much. All right, and then hold, give me 1 second. All right, the aquifer near Sumas Everson is highly influenced by the Fraser River in British Columbia, and it is proven contributes to the Nooksack River watershed. Will Ecology be calculating that influence in determining the quantity of groundwater available?
So let me just be clear on what we do in adjudication. I have heard a lot of people talk about the Sumas aquifer and whether it goes up to Canada or comes down to Nooksack. This is one reason that we have decided to adjudicate the entirety of Wyra 1 up to the Canadian border. What is I anticipate happening is, for one thing, we will include all Sumas water users so that everybody is involved and has an opportunity to participate in the lawsuit and have their water protected in the lawsuit, including in the Sumas. As far as the hydraulic continuity, the question there is whether there would be impairment as between the aquifer and the streams at some level. And the best I can say, shorthand for that, is that Ecology uses its own best available science to look at that and look at the current knowledge about continuity. And then in the process, that is what we'll be presenting to the court, but anybody can object. They can object with their own scientists or technical experts to say, you know, we disagree with Ecology's conclusions on hydrology.
All right, and then the next one is, and I think this goes back to your mention of the 500 gallons a day. This seems to imply that small residential users also on a permit exempt well will not be allowed to claim up to the 5,000 gallon per day limit. Is this true?
Okay, so thank you. This is a good question. Again, with permit exempt uses, the use goes with the historic date and the historic usage of the water. And so if someone has not used 5,000 gallons per day ever or regularly, we would not support or expect them to have a water right for 5,000 gallons per day. 5,000 gallons per day is the maximum permit exemption, and many people, many users have likely used 5,000 gallons per day up until, you know, before their permit exempt use. And that is, you know, an easy kind of generalized case where one can qualify for a adjudicated certificate in that amount. If somebody has not used 5,000 gallons per day, then they would not qualify for an adjudicated certificate for that amount. And the reason is because if they've never used 5,000 gallons per day, they've only ever had a single house that uses more like 300 to 500, then all of a sudden now allowing 5,000 gallons per day would allow more than 4,000 gallons per day of essentially new use to impact that system. And that use should be junior in priority. If they want to have a new permit or new exemption that goes in tomorrow or in 2025, that should be junior to other users that are already established, and it shouldn't be allowed for that new use to impair users. That being said, we are proposing a simplified process with a floor of a small amount of water use that would correlate to a single home's use. And under that amount, it would be just a floor. So it wouldn't matter between 50 gallons, 100 gallons, 150 gallons a day, because that is a relatively very small use of water. it's a cumulatively a small use of water, and we just really need to know who is out there and what they're using more than we want to than we see any benefit of going through a great deal of work to distinguish that very small amount of water at the end. I think I said what I meant there. I'm sure I'll read the transcript later and wish I had been more eloquent, but I think I answered you.
All right. Does the Water Rights Search Explorer accurately represent the claims/rights that are on file as well as the place of diversion? The reason I ask is so we know if Ecology's own Explorer will serve as evidence of a claim/right beyond the paper certificate.
That's a great question, and I'm glad that you asked it. You know, I can't see who's asking, so I assume these are all Jimmy's questions. Jimmy, that was a great thing to ask. The Water Rights Explorer is a tool. It's like a window, or it's like Google. Your information isn't on Google. Google just gets you to the information. So Water Rights Explorer will lead you to a document. And the answer there is yes, that document is very good evidence, perhaps the best evidence of the priority date and the original authorized amount of water. So we really encourage people to go into Water Rights Explorer, do the search, and don't just stop at the circles and triangles, but click on those and see what documents are underlying them. The mapping has been done and it's pretty darn good, but there's always, the mapping was done by hand to enter old typed like legal descriptions into the database. So there's always a chance that the dot is kind of in the wrong place, and the actual evidence, the actual water right, is going to be a picture, like a PDF of a permit or a certificate that you can look at, linking through with the Water Right Explorer.
All right. All right. This one is following Robin's slides 8 and 9. How will the two tribes assert their claims on and off reservation water use? What role will the federal government play in this process?
Yeah, you know, I am looking forward to seeing that happen in this case, because we have heard a lot and worked with tribes for many years and heard a lot about their water interest and water claims. But this is the chance for them to submit those in a portfolio. I say portfolio because I imagine it as like different pieces with a cover sheet. That's not the official word, but their claim that will include like both law and history for a water right. That's going to be the information that the tribes will be submitting to the court. As far as what role the feds play, the federal government, you know, is a trustee for the tribe through the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the Department of Interior. The tribes can speak best to that. I don't want to venture too much into it, but they're generally representative and support the tribes on that.
All right. What was your budget request and how likely is the ledge to fund it?
Well, our budget request for the Nooksack was $2.9 million for the biennium, and that is for this case and for our staff to file the adjudication service, which is certified mail and publication of all the water users in the area, and the staff that's involved for the first 2 years of an adjudication. There's also an additional request by the Administrative Office of the Courts that will be directly provided to Whatcom County for the court support and court use at that time in order to have the courts be prepared and for the e-filing system that I was describing earlier. And I don't have that dollar amount in front of me, but that's a separate chunk of money. There also is a separate chunk of money for Lake Roosevelt adjudication, which is another project that we're doing that we're not discussing tonight. As far as chances, you know, the legislature is currently doing their proposing bills that are more policy bills. They get their budget forecast in March and they look at shaping the budget after that time in 2 separate budget committees. It's in the operating budget, I can tell you that. Other than that, I'm just not a gambler when it comes to predicting actions of things outside our control. We do know that we have a lot of support in addition to a lot of concern, some concern locally about adjudication, but we feel like it's a strong, well thought out budget package. It has the support of the governor's office. And so we are, I would say I'm optimistic, and certainly our staff is preparing so that we're ready when we do know how the budget is comes through.
All righty. I live in the South Fork Valley, and a lot of my neighbors, permit exempt wells serving homes and small gardens, are concerned adjudication will adversely impact them. If they file their claims correctly, does Ecology expect these users to be largely unaffected by adjudication?
Yeah, that's a really good question. For homes, I want to be really clear, and this gives me a chance to say it. For residential use, the Department of Ecology will not and does not ever support curtailment of in-home and single home use of water. And so one reason, as labored as it sounds to inventory permit exempt wells, right now we don't know how many permit exempt wells there are. We have no way of knowing because we have not been able to require permits. They are not in RATs because we do not have those documents by definition, right? And so this is our chance to know where the water is being diverted. And the reason we need to know that is so that we can defend that use. And I don't have indication, for instance, from tribes or feds, so I don't want to pick on them and say, you know, we will tell the feds that we're not going to support shutting you off. But we will. We are defending the residential use because the Department of Health requires those wells. So it is our sister agency within the state government that requires to have potable water supplies, and wells are a healthy source of water for many people that's required in their homes. And so we do not support the curtailment of that water, but we do need to know who is out there in order to defend them. And so for a single home with a residential garden for home use, and I'm, you know, if it starts to be more water and it starts to be looking more like 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 gallons a day for, you know, farmers market type use, then we're looking more like a larger commercial use that we need to understand more about that use. But for the smaller uses, we do not anticipate ever recommending their curtailment.
All right. Wow, we got a lot of questions here tonight.
Okay, Jimmy.
You totaled all the permits, claims, certificates, applications by subbasins. How about permit exempt wells? How many subbasins? How many by subbasins?
Yeah, well, I wish I knew. And that's what I was saying a moment ago, is that we don't have an inventory of permit exempt wells. We know how many parcels there are. There are thousands of parcels in rural Nooksack, rural Whatcom County. There are many thousands of those. Most of them are smaller single home users, which is, you know, single home, single signature level of adjudication with a single document. And very simple adjudication process that is basically first date, house, address, and signature. And so, but we don't know how many of those are and how many are going to be more of the larger permit exempts, which are essentially small farms. And that's what this process is for. We will be serving everybody by certified mail and by publication.
All right. I'm wondering, how will notification be given once notification is given to property owners? How long will they have to respond and submit their documentation? So there, Robin?
Okay, I'm there. I'm here. Sorry, I didn't mean to freak you out. I just had to adjust something. He panicked.
All right. Did you see that last question? Or did you hear that last question?
I did. It was about times for filing claims. Well, the law says right now something like it's like 100 or 120 days unless we request more time for good cause, which we anticipate that we would do. We do not want or need every claim to come in a month after we serve thousands of people by certified mail. We want to do this well. We want to have adequate public outreach. We want to have technical support, and we really want to be prepared to be looking at these claims when they come in. So I would anticipate, let's see, 100 days is 3 months. That would be the absolute earliest after claims filing. I will anticipate asking the court for more time, or even going through time in like by sub-basin, so that we could do them in order, but we haven't determined that yet.
Okay. Will your adjudication process have any impact on federal water rights from the 19th century?
So federal water rights from any century will need to participate in the adjudication. Every water right on the system, everything on that map really needs to be involved in the adjudication. Now, if it has been used or has a reservation, they call federal reserves, and it's a funny word, but like national forests have a reserve as of the date of the forest, basically meaning that when like Congress or the president made a national forest, they intended it to have enough water for it to be a national forest. And so whatever the date is of that is a priority date on that federal water. Now, forests themselves in this area are really high up in the watershed. And so even if they are very early, they're very high up. So they're probably not going to be in impairment relationship with someone downstream. But the answer is yes. We can involve the federal government and the tribes for any water use in state court in this adjudication. Adjudication is actually a really rare area of law where we can sue the United States in our state superior courts.
Okay. Next, are you supporting the county's request for $1 million to support a local settlement process?
So right now, we have our request in the governor's budget, and that's our position. We support what's in the governor's budget right now. It does not have a county settlement process budget item in it. The current biennium, so the last 2 years, did have a county settlement process budget item in it. And so right now we support the budget, the governor's budget. If there is a proposal that we hear about through official channels, you know, a proviso that is sponsored by a legislator in committee, then our government team will look at those specific proposals and give official feedback through the legislative process. And so you will watch for those to, they say drop, you know, watch for those provisos to drop or be introduced, and then listen for Ecology's official position to come in through committee testimony.
All right. Do you expect the adjudication, when complete, to effectively make the Nooksack Basin a closed basin, i.e., no additional withdrawals allowed?
You know, that's a hard thing to imagine all the way out without seeing tribal claims for water. But I will say that in many cases, the Nooksack in-stream flow rules are in place. They have closures and minimum flows in it, and they have their own seniority, so that it is difficult to approve new permits and certificates in many or perhaps most areas within the Nooksack. That's not true for all of Wairo 1, I don't think, but in the Nooksack tributaries, the in-stream flow rules in general make it difficult for Ecology to approve new permits and certificates. For permit exempt uses, those go under our stream flow program, so those often can be approved for new wells for homes.
Okay. We are working through these slowly. Does Ecology recognize tribal reserved rights that are roughly commensurate with what fish need? And if so, why is Ecology so committed to exempt well development when these basins are over appropriated?
You know, I appreciate the question, and I really hear the concern. We understand that tribes claim a really significant right to water for fish. Our 1985 in-stream flow rule was a really good faith effort in order to protect water for fish in streams as of 1985. It was the understanding at that time that small, especially small groundwater uses, did not have the direct impact on those stream flows, either legally or hydrologically, in a way that would be detriment to fish. And that's my understanding from, you know, being a longtime ecology person. I was not here in 1985. Over time, we've learned more legally and hydrologically about the impacts on those of groundwater uses on stream flows, and Ecology's stream flow program right now, where this was actually a good segue because I just said this, that new permit exempt wells are authorized under the stream flow program. So that's the law. We're committed to, you know, in implementing the law that we get from the legislature, which includes the stream flow program. One thing about adjudication is it's going to let us know the quantification of tribal treaty rights. So, you know, this question at the beginning asked about recognizing tribal treaty rights. Recognition is a really particular legal term when it comes in to these conversations. Ecology is an agency of the state government. On our own, we are not a recognizer. We don't recognize tribes or their rights on our own, just having Rhea or even Laura sitting there and, you know, writing something down. That the act that they can take, that they're authorized to take, is not an act of recognition of tribal treaty rights. That's something that the courts need to do, which is why we really respect and appreciate the petitions of Lummi Nation and Nooksack tribe here, and think that adjudication is the best place to resolve this.
All right. And we keep getting typed questions, and I know we said we'd answer typed questions first, but there is someone who cannot find the tabs to type his question, and he's been waiting for a minute. So Barb, do you want to go ahead and unmute him, and then we'll get back to the written questions?
Sure. Jerry, if you still had a question, it was Jerry Burns.
Yes, hello. Robin answered my question. My question was the one about, does this adjudication process impact federal water rights? And she said, yes, it affects them from any century. And my question was specific to the 19th century. So I'll follow up on that with my state senator.
Okay, thank you. All right, back to the written questions.
you.
Then.
Okay, thanks, Jerry.
All right, next up, is it reasonable to promote residential development in a watershed where water is short and then turn around and say that these junior residential uses will never be shut off, even if they impair senior water rights?
Okay, Jimmy. Well, I think that it is the law right now, and it is the law to be sure that I don't know who promotes residential development, but I think that the law controls and monitors and provides for certain amount of permit exempt wells under certain conditions that are met under our stream flow program. And I know that, you know, RCW 9094, it was Bill 6091, I think, in 20, whatever year that was, 17 or 18. It was controversial, but it passed, and Ecology stands by that. I stand by the stream flow program. I think that it's good law, and I think that these are difficult decisions. And in this case, those decisions are made for us by the legislature. And so, you know, did the legislature make a mistake in that? I don't think it's ours to say here at Ecology. But I also think adjudication is an important point, which will, you know, look at the best ways to affect the stream flow. I think that smaller uses in the smaller permit exempt uses for homes are not just scientifically the largest impact on the resource. And so we're looking at finding what those impacts are and applying the law of prior appropriation to them.
All right. Thank you very much. Next up, Casey spoke of a parallel process being conducted by Whatcom County. What is that process?
Yeah, just real quick, and someone else asked about solutions table funding. Whatcom County has been really interested in bringing together people to talk about solutions. And so they had consultants. Casey, I don't know if you want to answer this. I want to keep moving because I want to get more questions done.
Go for it, Robin. I'll let you take it.
Well, and there's a WIRA One management board and those groups that have been working in their own conversations, but Whatcom County, as of this time, has its solutions table process, which has been trying to bring people together. And so far, there haven't been, big announcements or solutions released from that process.
Okay, thank you. Is Ecology going to conduct the hydrogeological analysis to determine the groundwater rights subject to the surface water rights? Also, are the subbasins in the map you showed going to be adjudicated separately as subbasins were done in Aquavella?
So yes, we will either be using our current information about hydrogeology, or if it's inadequate, getting new information on hydrogeology. So yes, that's part of our job in this. As far as the subbasins, I think that map is a pretty good one, but we are definitely want to have conversations about where the best places are to draw lines of subbasins and what is the best way to proceed. The Nooksack tribe and Lummi nations claim rights throughout the area. And so the way Aquavella, the Yakima adjudication did it, was that tribal claims and other federal claims were actually separate from subbasins. So it might be something like that that works in pathways for this. So possibly sounds good, but let's wait and see if there's an even better way to do it.
Okay. Will property owners be able to get a water right for a well to serve a new home after adjudication is completed?
So that is with the stream flow process, the 9094 process. We don't see why adjudication would change that, but there is a potential that it does if there are senior rights, including tribal rights in the area of the houses that would be going in. But we do, like I said, stand by the stream flow program at this time.
Okay. And when were well logs first required, and are well logs in the database?
So well logs are in a separate database, and I don't know, 5 points for anyone, Casey or Tom, that can remember the first date of well logs. Casey?
So I'm going to give you a vague answer. So first of all, the well log database is incomplete. So if you go in there and you have a well out back, you can see it, but you don't find a well log, that's totally okay. Very normal. Well logs were not required to be submitted to the state until, I want to say, the early to mid 1980s, although we certainly have ones that date back decades before that. Not a problem if it's not there. Doesn't mean it's not legal. It just means it wasn't required likely at the time. And you can certainly call our Bellingham field office at the phone number I put up there, or 360-255-4400 if you have more questions. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would also say we know there's not comprehensive well logs out there. Lack of a well log does not mean lack of a legal right to use the water. Someone could have drilled the well and has been using their water consistently and legally, even if there's not a well log.
Okay, and that seems to be all the written questions. I have 2 more on the list, but one looks like he stopped about halfway through, and the other one just agrees with another question. So yeah, we've done the written questions. Does anybody want to raise a hand and ask a question live? We have 7 minutes left. Wait, there's another written question. Is there any mechanism to prevent county land use to allow more dense housing that would impact my water right?
So, I mean, the answer is I don't know, but that doesn't stop me, does it? I think it's really important to look at the role of county land use in this process. County land use controls things like use, type of use and density, and whether it's, commercial, industrial, going to bring a lot of trucks down your road, or whether it's going to be residential, and if so, how dense. That really is the job of Whatcom County for the most part, and it's a comprehensive plan and that process. So that is the place to look for that process. Ecology's job is to look at legal water use, and we understand that has effects as to who uses water and what the priority was, how the land will be used. But that designation is something for, I want to say, you all, because most of you live in your county, for you all to be working with your county through its commissioners and planning process if you have concerns about the county land use.
All right, and we've got one raised hand from Mary Kay Robinson. I'll click ask to unmute. Are you able to unmute? Oh, there we go. Go ahead. Mary? Okay, hold on. Let's try this again. Hey, Barbara, can you unmute Mary Kay? She has her hand up. I think she wants to ask a question.
I do see that. And now I see you are unmuted, Mary Kay, but we are not hearing anything. I will say if you are connected on a phone, there are some special codes to click. If you're calling by cell phone, you can click *6 to mute or unmute. And then *9 will raise or lower your hand. I know we have some participants by phone. So *9 to raise or lower your hand, *6 to mute or unmute. Mary Kay, I'm sorry that we're still not hearing you. I think I almost heard you.
Mary Kay has a question in the chat.
Oh, good.
Oh, okay.
That went straight to you, Robin.
Oh, okay, Mary Kay, I have a question from you. Okay, this is why Jimmy does these, because it's hard for me to read them. You have to look at me reading. Mary Kay says, does Ecology support curtailment of water of farms in our county if there is not a right to water? So that is a good question. That farms should have a water right. There's a lot of paper water rights out there. There are old claims, there are certificates for up to 5,000 gallons per day. There's a permit exemption, and the adjudication should be looking at those. Water users that are junior to a senior user or that don't have a water right should be curtailed when necessary to protect senior use. And that's true of any use that does not have a water right. And that's true whether or not there's an adjudication. Users that have no right to water at all often do hear from the Department of Ecology on an enforcement basis. And that's something that happens regularly with or without an adjudication.
All right, we got one more written question. Who authorizes service areas for water providers?
That's a great question. I know how to find service areas for water providers. I believe they go through the Department of Health in their water system plan, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
Okay, and we're at the 2-minute mark. Last call for questions. Going once, going twice. Okay, if you think of one later, go ahead and one of the participants is verifying it is the DOH. But yeah, if you think of a question later, please feel free to email me at jimmy.norris@ecy.wa.gov. I'm sure Robin will take your emails as well. Sorry, Robin.
No, don't be sorry. That's literally my job. Well, I want to thank everybody for participating today. These were great questions. I don't know if I did them justice. If I watch the video of myself, I know I'll think I could have said it better, but I really believe in the benefit of having these live interactions, as imperfect as they are and ineloquent as we might be. I hope we were able to get a lot across today and connect on this information. So I'm
Okay.
really just
One last sticky one from Mary Kay again. Has there
Okay.
been a groundwater quantification elsewhere in the country, and was it successful?
Sure, in the country or in the county. So there has been an adjudication, for instance, of on reservation Lummi groundwater. The Lummi reservation was one that happened in Whatcom County. And I think that, yes, I think that's been successfully managed. A lot of water in the state of Washington, our groundwater is managed through a permit system. So usually a lot of the groundwater is successfully managed. It's just this permit exempt that makes it complicated.
Okay, and now it looks like for real, we've gotten through all the questions and we are right at time. Thanks again, everyone, for coming. Please feel free to email me if you have any more questions, or email Robin. And we're really glad everyone could make it.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. And again, please let us know if you want to do this one-on-one or in person or online to get into more specific questions. It helps us to have lead time for travel. But otherwise, we're really happy to talk.